I couldn't expect that, neither could you. That's why we wouldn't know. But given the data we're seeing now, given the information that I have at my hands, I 100% am still holding true. Values in Texas aren't going to go down. They might ebb and flow, but overall, the values in Texas are going to continue to hold steady in some areas, but continue to go up, but at more of a traditional rate. We're not going to see those, 15, 20% year over year appreciations. We might see 3 to 7% year over year appreciation. Hey, what's up folks? Realtor Chris Hall. So today I want to talk about the real estate market, what I've seen over the past few years, what I saw in 2018, what I saw in the home sales in 2018, what I saw interest rates do in 2018. Let's move through, let's take a look at all those years. Let's look at those seasonal trends. And then also let's take a look at what happened in 2022 and how we saw those same seasonal trends and how we saw the interest rates really exacerbate those seasonal trends where the homes kind of increase in value over the summer. And then you see a little bit of a slowdown and how those interest rates went up right when you get that seasonal slowdown. So it made the slowdown seem even worse. And this is kind of interesting to me because I almost feel like looking back at last year, any inclination that the real estate market was moving backwards or values were moving backwards, it was like instantly, oh, there it is, folks, right there. Look at that. Market's crashing. Well, I don't think it necessarily crashed. We saw a correction. We saw seasonal trends that were exacerbated by high interest rates. Now, let's take a look real quick, and I want to show you what I saw the interest rates do and what I saw the home values do. So if you look at this, you can see that you just have a seasonal trend. It ebbs and flows since 2013 all the way to, I would say, about the beginning of 2020. And that's kind of when the market went a little bit bananas with COVID and everything. Now, the interesting thing about COVID, as soon as COVID hit, almost everybody took their homes off the market. And I had quite a few folks that were really nervous and they thought about buying, but they decided not to. And a lot of folks were saying that the housing market was going to crash. And I was out there saying, like, I don't understand how the housing market is going to crash because there's no homes for sale. And if there's no homes for sale, how are you going to have a crash? And I had buyers that wanted to buy, or mostly it was like relocation folks that had to buy. And there were just no homes for sale. And then that kind of fed the craziness going through 2020, 2021, and I'd say about half of 2022. Now, something really interesting happened in 2022, and I saw the same thing happen in 2018. And that was the interest rates went up at a very pivotal point in the market where you naturally see a bit of a cooling just because of the seasonal trends of the market. Now, when you look at that on a graph or a chart, you can see that the market has its seasonal ebbs and flows, and you can see how those interest rates really manipulated the market and really manipulated the values as well. And part of me, I can't help but think, I don't want to sound conspiratorial here, but I can't help but think that this was done on purpose. Maybe it was the right thing, because I will say, in 2022, when those interest rates jumped up in October, we definitely saw the market slow down. And we really started to see, as those interest rates go up, the home values started to slide down a little bit, but they didn't crash. There's a huge difference between a seasonal trend that was exacerbated by high interest rates and a full-on housing market crash, right? Big difference. Now, the other thing is too, I want to also look and see what those trends did, see how that's going to affect the market, and then also what the heck is going to happen in 2023. Now, in 2023, I genuinely believe that the home values are going to they're going to go back up. And this is going to be mostly for Texas and predominantly North Texas, because it's where I do most of my business. Now, I've also tried to ask myself, okay, Chris, if everything else that you're reading out there is saying that the housing market is potentially going to crash, I have to look at who the messenger is. And there are different folks out there where I've been following their information for years. And it's very interesting to me that, some of these folks, they start out, when I first time I saw them, maybe they had a few thousand followers, maybe they had a few 100,000. And as they build, they get to where they have millions of followers. And then it's also like their narrative just changes. It's almost like they're saying one thing, but I'm seeing another thing. It's very interesting to me. And I'm hearing people say one thing about the market, but I'm seeing the market do a completely different thing. I'm hearing people say one thing, and then I'm actually talking to humans in real life, and they are saying a completely different thing. So I truly believe that the real estate market, at least in Texas, is going to continue to improve. And part of this has to do with, I am looking at seasonal trends that I've seen for years. I'm seeing what happened in 2018. I see what happened in 2020. I see a lot of similarities there. I'm seeing that there's a huge pent-up demand for buyers as well. Because think about it, if you live in Texas, from pretty much I would say towards the end of 2020 to the middle of 2022, if you were just what I would call a traditional buyer, you could not compete in that market. So a lot of the folks that moved here from out of state that had a lot of cash that could outcompete those, let's call it native buyers, if we will. A lot of those folks have secured their properties, and now you have what I would, once again, I'd say like the more native or the more traditional buyers. They still want to buy and they still want to sell and they still want to move up. So there's still a lot of pent-up demand there as well. Now, the other thing I have to look at is just the overall economics of Texas. I hate to say it this way because I don't want to sound boastful about being a Texan, but I'm pretty damn proud of being a Texan. And I'm really, anybody, if you're in Texas, you should just count your blessings, because we are lucky enough to live. Not only do we live in the United States, which is pretty awesome in my opinion, contradictory to what some people might believe, but being the fact that we're in Texas, I mean, we're pretty lucky in that standpoint. So I wanted to look back and said, okay, let's take away the market trends. Let's take away the interest rates. Let's go a little bit anecdotal on this to a certain degree, but let's look at Texas as a whole and try to determine, is buying a home in Texas a good idea today? Or should you wait for a few more years, or maybe after the election, and see what's going to happen? Maybe home values do crash. Maybe they do go down. And if you buy now, you're going to kick yourself on the butt in a few years. But I'd be remiss to think that to be the fact. So let's take a moment here and really look at Texas for Texas as it is. So did you know that if Texas decided to become its own nation, it'd be the ninth largest nation according to its GDP? So that's pretty cool to know. And then I also found in 2018, the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas had a study that noted that Texas has the highest retention rate for its residents. So once folks come to Texas, they're less inclined to leave than anywhere else in the United States. Texas has a retention rate of approximately 82%. And then I also saw that approximately 60% of the folks that move to Texas are from out of the state, but they're within the United States. And here's another interesting thing. 42% of those folks came from California. Now, the reason why I point out California, and that's probably nothing new to a lot of folks, especially after the past few years, we know a lot of Californians have come to Texas. But I can remember my grandmother. She was a real estate agent. She was a brokerage, and so was my mother. And I can remember my grandmother. Let me back up a little bit. My grandmother started her real estate career in California. And I can remember her telling me how California was back in the 80s. And the information that I'm about to go through talking about Texas, it reminds me of the stories of what my grandmother told me how California was back in the 70s and 80s. So I genuinely believe that Texas is in the same position that California was, I would say the late 70s or the early 80s. So to kind of go off on this little bit of a tangent, if you're thinking the home values in Texas are going to crash, I don't think that to be the case. Because we saw what California values have done. Go back and look and see what California values were in the 70s, and let's see what California values have done since then. So a lot of folks have come here from California, but it's not just the people, it's the corporations. Texas has so many different companies. I'm not going to even list all the companies that have moved to Texas in, let's say, the past 5 years. So not only do you have the corporations coming here, you have the people moving here because of the government overreaches in other states, and then you have the even more corporations coming here because of our tax-friendly environments. And as of 2020, Texas surpassed just a little over 30 million people. And back in 2019, we were sitting right at about 28 million people. So we've added a lot of people. We've added a lot of corporations and companies and opportunities for people to make money. Texas already, before all that happened, had the largest retention rate out of every other state. So I think to myself, if you have all these people coming here and all these people want to stay here, you got about 30 million people. Texas only has about 11 million homes in it. As of, I believe it was like 2019 was the latest study that I could find. So let's bump that up and say there's 12 million homes in Texas. So you got about 30 million people that live in Texas. You got about 12 million homes. I understand that some of those people are going to live in the same home. So even if you cut that number in half, I thought to myself, Well, how many of those homes are owned by people? So then I saw that Texas as a whole, it's about 62% owner occupancy. So about 62% of the homes in Texas are owned by people that live in that home. But then I thought to myself, well, back in 2015, I started noticing a lot of investors purchase up homes, at least in my marketplace. Now, I'm not going to say the name of this particular brokerage or the firm, but it was a large brokerage I take that back. It was actually a smaller brokerage that partnered with an investment firm out of China, and they were buying up basically anything and everything they could in Dallas County. I mean, any listing that I listed from HEB East got an offer from this company, and the offers were pretty good. They really were. I had quite a few sellers sell to them, and it was interesting because the sellers were stuck in a bit of a conundrum because you have a family here that wants to buy your home, but maybe it's 5% down conventional or something like that. Or you had a cash buyer that oftentimes was higher than the finance buyers. So then it just came to the moral decision if that seller wanted to sell to a family for a slightly lower price or sell to the investor. And some folks picked the investor. So I was curious, I looked in Dallas, and in Dallas, as of today, they're looking at about a 41% owner occupancy. So that means about 60% of the homes in Dallas County are owned by investment firms or, maybe somebody like me who just owns a few rental properties. Then I also have to step back and look and say, okay, are those homes ever going to go on the market or at least anytime soon? Now, the thing that makes me nervous about these large corporations owning the homes is they own some of the most important homes in Texas. They own the first-time home buyer or the what I would call like a first-time home buyer home, like a 3-2-1 type setup. But they also buy a lot of what I would call like the move-up buyer or the stepping stone home. And those are kind of the foundation of the real estate market. And those investors aren't probably going to be too inclined to sell those properties right now because remember, I just said Texas added a little over 2 million people in the past 2 years. So you got all these corporations moving here. You got all these people moving here. 30 million something people, 12 million something homes. Let's say 60% of those, 40% of those homes are owned by investors. So inventory is still really low. I still don't see any way possible, bar something completely unexpected happening that's going to create a situation where the home values in Texas are going to actually move backwards. So that's my conclusion in a long-winded version with a few cool graphs put in to give you a little bit of an idea of why I genuinely cannot find one true reason why the home values in Texas are going to go down anytime soon. Excluding something that we just can't predict. Something could happen that would just throw a complete cheek in the chain, and then I would have to come back and say, oh yeah, I was totally wrong. But once again, I don't think I would be wrong because I couldn't expect that, and neither could you. That's why we wouldn't know. But given the data we're seeing now, given the information that I have at my hands, I 100% am still holding true. Values in Texas aren't going to go down. They might ebb and flow, but overall, the values in Texas are going to continue to hold steady in some areas, but continue to go up, but at more of a traditional rate. We're not going to see those, 15, 20% year over year appreciations. We might see 3 to 7% year over year appreciation. So hope the video wasn't too long, folks. I hope you enjoyed. Until next time, have a great day. And that's the end of the video.